Hey all, Creator again. Content warnings this time for body horror, death, tragic imagery. Want the world to feel real, which means real problems and bad things happen. But like last time, there will be a warning before it and chapters in the description if you want to skip. Enjoy the video otherwise, though. Bye. Welcome, everyone, to the fourth lecture in this series covering the continents. My name is Taishi, the instructor for this class, and I hope to teach you about the history of this world. This is. Today we will be covering the continent of East Torin. For starters, East Torin is allied with South Torin against North and West Torin. I shall refrain from talking about the war until we have a lesson about the war itself. Another part of this continent that I will not be covering is the Roth, a large portion of the continent that would take an entire lecture upon itself to cover. However, there are many other special parts about East Torin. It is well known for being highly specialized in defense, is the continent from which I hail, and the continent in which this lecture is being recorded in. The first location we will discuss are the scarred plains of Dornhelm is a war-torn city and a tale of tragedy and catastrophe that came into being before the splitting of Great Torin during the conquest of Sundered Realms, a war between Great Torin and Dynacurd. One of the high parsons of Dynacurd called for a divine intervention that instantly advanced everything within 20 miles of the city ahead by 1,000 years, almost instantaneously killing everyone and destroying everything within the radius. The event that created this landmark also started the decline of the war between the two nations, as even those high up in the government of Dynacurd thought that this was far too much. The stories you can tell just by observing this environment are terrifying and heart-wrenching. A pair of fossils huddling over a third skeleton, showing a family trying to protect their child. A skeleton clutching at their stomach as their child, who is yet to be born, suddenly grows to full size, and many more that would drop the tone of this lecture off a cliff into shallow water inhabited solely by sea urchins. As you look across the destroyed landscape, you can imagine the buildings that were supposed to last for centuries, the memories of the people and how they lived, and the industries that thrived within the city. Not much happened in the conquest of Sundered Realms, and thus I believe I can also talk about the war without making this section too much longer. The war started after a Kurdian diplomat was assassinated while on a trip to Great Torin, and ended after 50 years as the fighting overseas depleted a vast majority of the resources between both continents. Then they came together to form a belligerent truce. The next landmark is much lighter in tone. It is known. The Dragonheart Bastion is built out of a dark stone carved into scales, and the imagery of long dragons crawling up the castle spires. This castle-like structure was built to embody the majesty of dragons. The dragon knights that inhabit the bastion siphon power from an artifact known as the Heartstone. The Heartstone grants those who attune to it powers from the primeval plane. However, asking any of the dragon knights will result in a claim that they draw their strength from the last portion of Io, the great dragon god's powers. The knights train both body and mind to be able to wield their powers and to not solely rely on their magic. The knights follow a strict code of conduct to protect the weak and the bastion when in need. After one goes through their initiation and gains the powers of Io, they are free to do whatever they wish as long as it does not directly harm the bastion or the continent. For this reason, there are many knights in many different types of work, such as adventurers in the Fodwick Adventurers Guild, priests for the Dragon Gods and Dynacurd, soldiers in the military, and even researchers, such as Mr. Hajor here at this school. The next landmark shall be Humerin's Cascade is constructed of cliffs that reach far into the sky, almost touching the clouds, with waterfalls flowing down, both combining and separating into other waterfalls that presumably hide many secrets, and they eventually all flow into the Lake of Arcady, the god of restoration. There have been sightings of a large moose-like creature with antlers of ice that the locals refer to as Humerid, the namesake of this landmark. Humerid has also been rumored to give out quests to those it deems worthy, and rewards those who complete the quests. At the bottom of each of the falls, there's a large clouds in the mist that add it to a mystique in the location. The entrance to the cave that Humerid supposedly resides in is located behind a waterfall on the first plateau of the cascade, which is approximately 1,000 feet above the Lake of Arcady. The fourth place that we will cover in this lecture is the Celestial Arch once appeared in the middle of the plains of East Torin in the span of one night. No one knows how or why it's there, but it does seem to have a connection to Mafalid, the god of magic. This connection is purely conjecture, however, we will cover the theories, if for no other reason than to grant you more knowledge about the world you currently live in. The main theory is that the arch is a ring of eyes from a recently deceased angel of Mafalid. Another is that it is a gate that leads to a plane that Mafalid resides on. And the third and final theory is that it was simply placed by Mafalid to give creatures of this plane something to think about and study to learn more about the magic that they have granted us. Some who have passed through the arch claim to have seen things that they couldn't before. There is no reason not to believe these people, as most who have claimed to see these things seem to be honest people. However, it may be wise to doubt these statements anyways, as some of these so-called honest people may have been hiding their true nature. This being said, I am a very skeptic person, and I could simply be overthinking this. Since the arch has shown up, the surrounding area has become much more vibrant, with unnaturally green meadows and trees, extremely bright flowers, and a crystalline blue river meandering through the middle of the arch. That finishes our discussion on the celestial arch, and we shall transition into our next topic of... The Phoenix Forge is renowned for producing some of the finest weapons, armor, and enchanted items in all Jeor'n-Dith. It feels inadvisable to tell a group of youngsters such as yourselves this information, as you're on the same continent especially. However, I do pride myself as a teacher for giving you all of the information available at any given time, so I will give you this information. Inside the Phoenix Forge, there exist two powerful artifacts that power the forge and its smiths. In the very center of the forge is the Eternal Flame, a flame that, as you might guess, eternally burns. It was given to the original smiths of the forge by a phoenix of the Sunwings tribe as a gift for creating a nest for themselves and their family. The second artifact that only the master smith of the forge is permitted to use is the Hammer of Tiseda, presumably gifted to an extremely gifted smith by the god of crafting themselves. However, the true origins of this hammer are unknown. The hammer itself has many powers, including, but not limited to, personal weight manipulation, heat manipulation, strength enhancing, and sentience. Enchanted magical items created within this forge tend to, as a side effect, have abilities to combat the cold, control or manipulate fire, or possibly both, but they do still have their original powers meant to be imbued into the item. Allegedly, inside the walls of this forge are huge mechanical constructs called Wardens of the Suns, waiting until the forge is in dire need of protection to emerge. This ends my lecture on the continent of East Torin. Next week we will be covering Astronaut. But until then, have a good week. Can't stop, won't stop, running to the bag. You losing, I've been running, shit, no, I can't come and last. Can't stop, won't stop, running to the bag. I've been working too long, no, there ain't no time for naps. Can't stop, won't stop, running to the bag.